Welcome to the deep dive. You bring the sources, we bring the clarity. Today, we're getting into something that really affects our cities, especially in summer, the urban heat island effect.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, literally. And we're looking at it through a very specific framework.
Exactly. We've got parts of the LED V5 standards here, focusing right in on the heat island reduction credit. This is for new construction projects.
Right. LED BD plus C, new construction V5, specifically SSc5.
Our mission today is to unpack what this actually means. What are the requirements? What strategies does LED suggest to, cool things down?
We'll need to make sense of the technical bits, the materials, the calculations, the different options they give you.
Because it really matters, doesn't it?
Yeah,
How we design buildings and cities, it changes the local climate.
absolutely. Think dark roofs, sprawling pavement. They just soak up sun all day,
And then release it at night, making cities hotter than the countryside around them.
which leads to more AC use, impacts air quality, and can be pretty dangerous during heat waves.
So LEED is trying to mitigate these, what they call disparate impacts on microclimates and habitats. That's the goal here.
Tackling extreme heat events, which seem to be getting more common.
So if you're curious about how our world works, how standards like these try to shape a better environment, well, you're in the right place. Stick around for this deep dive. And hey, if you like breaking down complex stuff like this, source by source, definitely hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss out on future explorations.
Yeah, definitely subscribe.
Okay, let's get into these LEE requirements. The credit itself, SSc5 heat island reduction, it's worth up to 2 points.
Right, and 2 points in LED can be pretty significant when you're chasing certification. It shows it's a priority.
So how do you earn these points? The source lays out 3 different options.
Yeah, 3 distinct paths, of which is good. It gives projects some flexibility based on, their specific situation, their site, what they're trying to achieve.
You can go for one option to get 1 point, or maybe combine things to get both.
Well, the source outlines option 1 and option 2 as each being worth 1 point, and option 3 is also worth 1 point. You need to achieve the requirements for potentially 2 different options or pathways to get the full 2 points, depending on how the final point structure works. But let's look at option 1 first.
Okay, option 1, non-roof and roof strategies. This one sounds pretty comprehensive. It's worth 1 point.
It really is. This one is all about treating the surfaces on your site, both the ground level stuff and the roof. The core idea is swapping out heat-absorbing surfaces for things that reflect sun, provide shade, or cool through evaporation.
And there's an equation involved, equation 1. Looks a little intense at first glance.
It does, but let's break it down. It says area of non-roof measures 0.5 plus area of high reflectance roof 0.75 plus
Oh.
area of vegetated roof 0.75. That whole sum needs to be greater than or equal to the total site paved area plus the total roof area.
Okay, whoa. So those denominators, the 0.5 and 0.75, they're weighting factors.
Exactly. Dividing the non-roof measure area by 0.5 is like multiplying it by 2.
Right.
And dividing the roof areas, either high reflectance or vegetated, by 0.75 is like multiplying them by about 1.33.
So the roof strategies get a slightly heavier weight, or rather you need proportionally less roof area treated to meet the requirement compared to non-roof area. No, wait, the denominator is smaller for non-roof. That means non-roof measures get a bigger boost. Area divided by 0.5 is double the area.
You're absolutely right. I misspoke there. Dividing by 0.5 doubles the effective area of the non-roof measures. Dividing the roof measures by 0.75 increases their effective area by a factor of 1.33. So yes, the non-roof measures like shade actually get a stronger weighting per square foot in this calculation. Good catch.
Okay, so non-roof strategies like shade count double, while cool roofs or green roofs count 1.33 times their area. The goal is for the weighted sum of your good strategies to effectively cover all the potentially bad surfaces, pavement, and roof.
Precisely. You're covering the impactful areas with effective weighted solutions.
Makes sense. So what counts as a non-roof measure? What are the specific things you can do on the ground?
Okay, the source lists a few. First, providing shade over pavement. This is measured based on the shadow cast at solar noon.
Like literally the area shaded at midday.
Yep. And you can get this shade from existing trees, or new trees they let you assume a 10-year canopy size for new plantings, or from vegetated structures like, say, a pergola with vines. The key is the shade has to be there when the building opens.
So planting shade trees strategically or building green trellises over walkways or patios.
Exactly. The second one is putting structures covered by energy generation systems over pavement.
Like solar panel carports.
Perfect example. Or even wind turbines, though less common over pavement. The area shaded underneath counts. It's a great 2-for-1. clean energy and heat reduction.
Nice.
What else? Third is architectural devices or structures built just for shade over paved areas. Think building overhangs, awnings, separate shade structures.
Okay.
And for these, the material matters. Specifically, it's solar reflectance, or SR. That's just how much sunlight it reflects.
Higher SR means more reflection, less heat absorption.
Right. For a shade device on a roof, it needs an aged SR of at least 0.28. For non-roof devices, or if you only have initial data, the initial SR needs to be 0.33 or higher.
Age versus initial, so materials can get less reflective over time.
Yeah, dirt, wear, and tear. Aged values give a more realistic long-term picture. These SR values come from a specific standard, NSICRRC S100, the Cool Roof Rating Council's method. It ensures everyone measures the same way.
So light-colored shade structures are better. Got it. Any others?
Yep. Fourth is using paving materials that are inherently reflective. Again, an initial SR of 0.33 or more. Using that same NSCRRC standard.
So choosing lighter concrete or maybe special reflective asphalt mixes instead of the usual blacktop.
Exactly. And the last non-roof measure is open grid pavement systems.
Like those pavers with gaps for grass or gravel.
That's them. The requirement is at least 50% of the area has to be unbound, filled with vegetation, gravel, something permeable. This cuts down the solid heat-absorbing surface and allows some natural cooling, especially if there's vegetation involved for evapotranspiration.
Okay, so that covers the non-roof side of option 1. What about the high reflectance roofs part?
This is where we shift from just solar reflectance, SR, to the solar reflectance index, or SRI.
Ah, yes, SRI. It's a bit more complex.
Slightly. It combines the solar reflectance, how much sun it bounces off, with thermal emissivity, how well it radiates away the heat it does absorb. A higher SRI means a cooler surface overall.
And like SR, there's aged versus initial SRI.
Yep, same logic. Aged is preferred because it reflects real-world performance over time. If you don't have age data, you use the initial value. The source gives specific minimums in a table, and they depend on the roof slope.
Right, I see that. For low-sloped roofs, defined as 2.12 pitch or less,
Pretty flat roofs, basically.
they need an aged SRI of 64 or an initial SRI of 82 if aged isn't available.
And for steep slope roofs, so anything over a 2.12 pip.
The requirement is lower. Aged SRI of 32 or initial SRI of 39. Why the difference? Why less stringent for steeper roofs?
Well, the angle matters. A steep roof doesn't get quite the same intensity of direct overhead sun for as long as a flat roof does, especially around solar noon when the sun is strongest. It might also shed heat a bit differently just due to the angle and airflow. So a material with a slightly lower SRI on a steep slope can still have a comparable effect on reducing overall heat gain compared to a higher SRI on a flat roof.
Okay, that makes sense. The physics of the angle changes things.
And the standard is practical too. It notes that some functional roof areas like helipads, rooftop courts, even pools don't have to meet these roof SRI values. But they can potentially count towards the non-roof strategies if they use shade or reflective pavers, for example.
Ah, okay. And things like AC units, solar panels themselves, skylights, those are just excluded from the calculation.
Right, they aren't the main broad roof surface we're worried about absorbing heat. It keeps the focus practical.
Okay, and the final piece of option 1 is the vegetated roof.
This one's pretty straightforward. Put simply, install a green roof.
Like with plants growing on it.
Exactly. The credit encourages using native or adapted plant species. That's good for biodiversity, reduces water needs.
And the plants themselves cool the roof through shade and evapotranspiration, releasing water vapor.
Precisely. So option 1 is this kind of toolkit: shade, reflective surfaces, green roofs, permeable paving. You use the weighted equation to make sure you're doing enough across the whole site, pavement and roof combined, to earn that point.
It offers a lot of design freedom, blending different approaches.
Definitely. Teams can pick and choose based on what works best for their climate, their budget, their design aesthetic.
Okay, that's a solid overview of option 1. Let's move to option 2. Parking under cover. This sounds much more specific, also worth 1 point.
Very specific. The name says it all, really. The requirement is simple, but potentially challenging. Place 100% of your parking spaces under cover.
100%. Wow, that's a lot of cover.
It is. But think about a massive asphalt parking lot baking in the sun. It's a huge heat sink. Covering it completely eliminates that direct solar gain on the pavement.
Yeah, parking lots are definitely major culprits for heat islands.
So the strategy is direct. Shade the parking. But then the cover itself needs to meet certain criteria. You can't just cover it with a dark, heat-absorbing roof.
Ah, of course. So what are the requirements for the roof of that covering structure?
They mirror the effective strategies we already talked about. The roof covering the parking must meet one of three conditions.
Okay.
Either it needs to have an age SRI of at least 32 or initial 39, same as steep slope roofs, or it needs to be a vegetated roof, or it needs to be covered by energy generation systems like solar panels.
So you're using a cool roof, a green roof, or a solar roof over the parking. Makes sense. You eliminate the heat absorption below, and you use a high-performance surface above.
Exactly. It turns a potential heat source into something much cooler, maybe even productive, like generating power or providing green space.
And which parking spaces count towards this? 100%.
The source says it includes all the off-street parking that the project controls, whether they own it, lease it, or subsidize it, even if some of that parking is technically outside the official project boundary, but is used by the project occupants.
But not like public street parking alongside the project.
Correct. That's generally outside the project's control.
Covering 100% still sounds tough for projects with huge surface lots, but maybe more achievable with parking garages or underground parking.
Absolutely. It strongly encourages integrating parking into structures or putting it underground. It forces a design decision early on, really prioritizing the reduction of that parking lot heat effect.
Okay, a very targeted but potentially high-impact option. Now, option 3, tree equity. This one sounds different again, also one point. It brings in a community angle.
It really does.
Okay.
This is a fascinating aspect of LEDV5. It directly connects the environmental strategy planting trees to reduce heat with social equity.
How so?
It starts from the premise that heat islands don't affect everyone equally. Often, underserved or lower-income communities have significantly less tree canopy cover.
Which means those neighborhoods get hotter and the residents are more exposed to heat-related health risks.
Exactly. There's often a clear disparity, so this credit tries to address that. The approach varies slightly depending on where the project is.
Okay, how does it work for projects in the U.S.?
For U.S. projects, you're directed to use a tool called the American Forest's Tree Equity Score.
Tree equity score. Well, what does that measure?
It's pretty sophisticated. It maps existing tree canopy, looks at surface temperature data, and overlays demographic information like income, age, race, to identify areas that have both low tree cover and populations that are more vulnerable to extreme heat. It flags neighborhoods with tree inequity.
So it pinpoints where trees are needed most for community well-being.
Precisely. And if your project site happens to be located in an area that this tool identifies as high priority or highest priority for tree equity,
On what?
then the requirement is you must use that data to inform your landscape design, specifically to increase the tree canopy cover on your site compared to what was there before. You're actively adding trees because the surrounding community is identified as needing them.
That's quite direct. Using the project to help address a documented community need for more trees and shade.
Yeah, it's a data-driven way to target the benefits of trees. Now, for international projects where the U.S.-specific tool might not apply, the approach is similar in spirit but uses different references.
Okay, how does that work?
International projects are pointed towards another AD prerequisite, IPP2, Human Impact Assessment. This is a broader requirement to assess how the project might affect neighboring communities. For this specific tree equity credit, you need to evaluate tree cover both on your site and in the surrounding community. You might use local census data or do a direct site assessment.
And
Then, crucially, you analyze the demographics of the local community to identify any neighboring underserved or disadvantaged populations who currently have lower tree canopy cover.
so you're actively looking for inequities nearby.
Yes. And the requirement is to use that analysis to increase your on-site tree canopy in a way that specifically provides shade to those neighboring underserved areas.
Wow, so it's not just planting trees anywhere on your site, but potentially locating them strategically, maybe near the boundary, so the shade actually benefits the neighbors who need it most.
Exactly. It's about leveraging the project's resources to provide a direct, tangible benefit cooling shade to vulnerable neighbors. It's a powerful link between green building and environmental justice.
That really shifts the focus beyond just the building itself.
It does. Trees are proven coolers through shade and evapotranspiration. This credit tries to make sure that cooling benefit gets distributed more equitably. The source does mention an exemption if the project involves no exterior work at all, which makes sense.
Right, if you're just renovating the interior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's pull this together. We've got 3 distinct options in LED V5 to fight heat islands, each worth a point, contributing to a possible 2 points total.
Yep. Option 1 is the broad surface treatment approach, using that weighted formula for shade, reflective materials, green roofs, permeable paving on both non-roof and roof areas.
Option 2 is laser focused. Cover 100% of your parking with a high-performance roof structure, cool, green, or solar.
And option 3 is about tree equity, using data or assessment to increase tree canopy, specifically targeting benefits towards underserved communities that lack shade.
It gives project teams different levers to pull, depending on their site, their design, and maybe even their community engagement goals.
Absolutely. Different strategies, all aiming for that same outcome. Cooler buildings, cooler sites, and ultimately cooler, more livable cities. It shows how technical standards can evolve to address both environmental science and social awareness.
It really is fascinating to see how something like the SRE standard translates these big ideas about climate and equity into concrete design choices.
Yeah.
Things like SRI values, tree placement, pavement types.
Yeah, the details matter for achieving the bigger picture.
It makes you think.
Well, here's something maybe for you, the listener, to consider. Thinking about these strategies, the cool roofs, the shade, the parking covers, the trees, what areas in your own neighborhood or maybe around buildings you go to often seem like they might be big contributors to that heat island effect? And how could even small changes, maybe inspired by these elite ideas, start to make a difference right where you live or work?
That's a great prompt. It encourages you to look at your surroundings with fresh eyes. Notice the color of roofs, the shade over parking lots, the presence or absence of trees in different areas. Maybe even check out that tree equity score for your own town. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explore the LED5 approach to heat island reduction. If you found this breakdown useful, want to keep digging into how our world is shaped by standards, science, and design, make sure you're subscribed to the deep dive. We've always got more sources to explore together.
Definitely subscribe. Thanks for listening.